Welcome to the Parent Academies in Arlington Public Schools. My name is Sam Klein. I'm the supervisor of the Office of English Learners, and you are participating now in the Parent Academy for Parents of English Learners. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to have you here and excited to have you as part of the APS family. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you're able to see a presentation where I'm going to talk to you a little bit about English Learner Services and things that you can do during distance learning and in the current situation that we're in. First, one of the most common questions I get is, how was my child identified for English Learner Services? Great question. In the United States, there's a law for all public schools that when a child is registered for school, they must fill out a home language survey. In Virginia, all of our school systems use the same home language survey questions. If a parent answers yes to any of the questions, and the questions are about first language used in the home or the languages spoken by the child, if they answer yes to any of those questions, then we must have the student take an English language proficiency assessment. It's part of the WIDA assessments. That will indicate whether they are a level 1, 2, 3, 4, or that they are English proficient and do not need English Learner Services. A parent has a right to refuse English Learner Services, but every year when we give the annual WIDA Access for L's English Language Proficiency Assessment for all students who are English learners, even those who have opted out are required to take the assessment. Every year, those assessments are done between January and March, and that information gives us great data to share with teachers so they know exactly the best ways to teach your child, but also so they know how your child is progressing through the English language proficiency levels, or if they became English proficient. The focus of the assessment is reading, writing, and speaking and listening through the content areas. So what happens when you get the assessment back? Well, the assessment is done and it's determined, is a student a level 1, 2, 3, 4, or are they English proficient? Level 1 would typically be for the most recent arrivals who might not have had schooling in English previously. As students learn English and attain English, then when they're assessed the next year, they might move to the next level, to a level 2 or a level 3. And as they go on, they progress through the levels, they become proficient or a level 6. Level 6 is called English proficient, but even those students are still learning academic English. So every student has a score, and this is a score report. Parents have a parent score report, and the schools have the student score report at school. Teachers take a look specifically at these. The reason why is because if you look at the bottom where it's circled in red, that's the overall score. So you see it's a 3.4, which falls into the L level 3 range. However, their scores aren't exactly the same for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. This is really helpful for a teacher to know that a student has stronger listening skills here, the example being a 4.0, than they do speaking skills. See, teachers like to build on the strengths of the students and then also work on things like, in this case, speaking. What additional speaking opportunities can the teacher provide for the students for them to practice their speaking in order to move up their speaking score? WIDA, as I mentioned, is an assessment, but it's also a set of standards. And one of the things WIDA does is they create what we call can-do descriptors. These are in the hands of teachers. So a teacher says, oh, this student is a 3.4, and in their listening, they're a level 4. Here's what they should be able to do. Of course, not everything written here is exactly the same for each student because each student is very unique. However, this level of information is very helpful for teachers as they build their lessons to know that this student's going to need additional support in speaking as they develop their other skills of reading, writing, and listening as well. So I'm going to talk in two parts about the role of the English learner teacher. I'll talk about it now and then in a few moments. So at elementary, the L teachers work very closely with the grade level teachers, say a second grade teacher or a fourth grade teacher. The English learner teacher's role is to focus on the English language development. They work in collaboration with the grade level teacher. So while the grade level teacher is focusing more on the content, whether that's fractions or the water cycle, the English learner teacher is focusing on the language development that goes along with that content. Most of the time, the L teacher goes into the classroom and works together. So there are two teachers in the classroom working with the students. But there are occasions where the L teacher pulls out a group of English learners to work on something specific. At secondary, our program is a little different. Services are delivered in self-contained or co-taught classes. What that means is if you look at a child's schedule for middle school or high school, they'll have a first period, second period, third period, etc. For our lower proficiency levels, for example, levels 1 and 2, they will have an ELD, English Language Development class for language arts. So I'll actually have two for language arts. And they might have one for science and social studies. The other way it happens is a co-taught class where the L teacher and the content teacher. So let's take a level 3 student who's in a science class. That class might be co-taught so that you have your science teacher and your English learner teacher. The English learner teacher is focusing on the English language development, while the science teacher is focusing on the content of science. Although I have to say they both understand both content and language go together, and they work on teaching them in tandem. We also have a group of specialized teachers called L resource teachers. They're only at the secondary level, and they specifically work with our students who are eligible for both English learner services and special ed services. If you have questions, if your child is a child who has both these services and you have an L resource teacher, please contact the school if you have questions about the work that they're doing. But they're really looking at all the needs of the student, making sure that all of their needs in language development and content attainment are met. We have two other positions that I'd like to point out that are very, very important in the school. One of them is the L counselor. So the L counselors are at middle and high schools, and their main role is to support students, English learners, who currently are experiencing trauma or possibly experienced trauma in the past or other hardships. You know, during the pandemic, a lot of students have had some social emotional needs, and the L counselor's role is to provide support for them. All of our L counselors are bilingual, and some of the things they can help with is overcoming difficulties with acculturation. For example, when a student comes to a new country and finds things very different. Or for some of our students, they have been separated for a period of time from their family, and now they're reunified. The reunification is a beautiful process, but for some students and parents, it's difficult. The L counselors are trained in helping the students and the families get together and work well on the unification. Most importantly, the L counselors are an important member of every school's counseling team, and they know how to focus on the student's social emotional growth and progress. If you have concerns about your child's social emotional well-being at this time, please make sure you contact the school and get a hold of the L counselor. They'd be happy to work with you. Another very important role in our schools is the bilingual family liaison. The bilingual family liaison, as I like to say, is the member of the faculty who holds the door open for all families and encourages everybody to participate in the school activities and in their child's education. Specifically, the bilingual family liaisons welcome new immigrant families into the school. They help them with enrollment, providing tours if necessary, but really they are the connection between the school and the community. Our BFLs, as we call them, bilingual family liaisons, like to do outreach and have meetings with parents and get parents into the school as much as possible. Another thing some of our bilingual family liaisons do is run programs, whether it's on reunification, as I just talked about, or about ways of talking to your teenager. They run a variety of workshops. My suggestion for you is if you do not know your school's bilingual family liaison, please feel free to contact the school and ask for the bilingual family liaison. They'll get in touch with you and they will help you connect to the school. But more importantly, if you have questions, they are a great first step. So they can connect you to the L counselor or a general ed counselor, or possibly to our instructional technology staff. They're very good at knowing who the person is in the school that you need to talk to. So our L services in person, I started to mention them previously. I just want to walk a little bit more closely through them. At elementary, as I talked about, the L teacher typically goes into a grade level class, whether that's kindergarten or third grade, and the grade level teacher and the L teacher plan and teach together. Again, the L teacher focuses on the English language development, and the grade level teacher focuses on the content. Oftentimes, the L teachers might work with a group of L students in the classroom as well, or on rare occasions, they might pull out a small group of English learners to work on something specifically. During distance learning time, I'm going to talk about in a few moments, that's looking a little different. Another role the English learner teacher has is they might consult or talk to the general ed teachers or the specialists to say, hey, here are some strategies that will work with your English learners. At secondary, again, our classes are typically self-contained, so they're learning language and content in the same class taught by an L teacher, so they're getting their content and their English language development together, or possibly in a co-taught class, which would be, for example, as I mentioned before, the science teacher and an L teacher with a focus on the content and the English language development. Distance learning. So distance learning in the spring is going to look a little different, or in the fall will look a little different than it did in the spring. Our teachers are really working hard to make sure that their classes are so full of language rich, and that they're ready for the students to be able to practice their language while also learning their content. So one of the things I talked about is generally in the school, the L teachers work at elementary inside the grade level classroom. During distance learning, they will continue to sometimes work in the grade level classroom in the big class, but other times they will be pulling out small groups of students. The reason for this is that they can focus on those small groups on the 4 language domains of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Specifically, the small groups will give the English learners more opportunities to engage in sustained reciprocal interaction around content. What does that mean? That means 2 or 3 students can have a conversation about the content that is a conversation back and forth. Not a simple question, for example, what is the water cycle? This will be more of an in-depth conversation about, for example, if they're learning about plants. One student might say, what does a plant need to grow? And the other student might say, one of the things they need is sunlight. And here's what the sunlight does. And the other student might say, is there anything else they need? And the student will respond, they need soil, which provides nutrients. And then they might ask, are there other things that you think they need? And it's a conversation back and forth. That's where a lot of language is developed by the students. They're learning the content and they're practicing their language. And in distance learning, those small groups will give more opportunities for the students to have those kinds of conversation. At secondary, because the classes are kind of first period, second period, third period, those classes will continue online to be similar in the sense that the English language development class with an L teacher will be taught the same way. They too will be using some smaller groups because, as you can imagine, a large group of students doesn't give the small group interaction as much opportunity. So by having smaller groups, they will be able to encourage and create opportunities for the sustained reciprocal interaction around content. That is very important for students. In addition, it will give teachers some time to work specifically on the reading and writing needs of each individual English learner. Overall, in Arlington Public Schools, we talk a lot about the language and content goals of any classroom lesson. When a teacher goes to write their lesson plans, they should have in mind the language goal and the content goal. Let's start with the content goal. So imagine a teacher is a social studies teacher and they're going to be teaching about westward expansion. That will be their content goal, something specific about that topic. The language goal is how the students are going to be able to express their learning or practice their learning about westward expansion. The language goal will include something for listening, speaking, reading, and or writing. So asking students to write out their responses is an example of a language goal. Every lesson has some part content and some part language. And in Arlington Public Schools, we really like to see lessons that involve all four of those areas, although not every lesson has all four. Sometimes there are three of the areas. Maybe it's just a day of reading and responding, so reading and writing. So here are a few tips that you can use to help your child with distance learning. So this is coming from a parent who had a student last year. My child was in high school last year. And so some of these things came from our experience with our own child. One of the most important things you can do to get them from that summertime mindset of playing outside and enjoying themselves is, okay, now it's time to come in each day at these times, these set times, because this is school time. In their mind, they're thinking, I'm not going to the building. Does it need to be at this exact time? Schools are going to have schedules. So one of the things you can do is help create a schedule, a written schedule that you post on the wall for your child. Number one, it might have the wake up time. You want them to wake up. It might say start with a healthy breakfast. And then you might have breaks in there, as the teachers will have, for stretching or for having a snack or for exercise. I really think it's important that students realize that they need to stand up, walk around, take breaks. I know for me, sitting here in front of a computer doing my work, I take breaks about every hour where I stretch, I do some exercises, or I have a snack. Okay. One of the other things you can do is provide what we call a quiet area. And if you notice on the left hand of the screen, there are two signs. One says notice quiet zone, and the other says quiet, please work in progress. Feel free to make up a sign like that and put that in the area where the student is working. If they're working in the dining room or in the kitchen area or on the couch or even in their own bedroom, you can put up a sign reminding all other occupants of the home that this is school time, please be quiet. And if it's also helpful if you can say during these hours, it's quiet time so that we're able to do our work. Of course, there are breaks so people can express themselves a little louder, or you can have a TV or music on. But during school hours or when students are doing their homework, their work, it's better to have a quiet zone or a quiet time. Now, very important too is that there's a space for your child to work on, whether it's a table or a desk, somewhere flat for them to put their device, whether it's a computer or a tablet, and a place for them to be able to write, whether it's figuring out some mathematical problems by paper or if it's actually writing something that they're learning. I always recommend to have a bottle of water, which I always have next to me, as a friendly reminder. It helps students stay hydrated, and that helps them with their learning as well. And then lastly, to reduce distractions, if you have a TV on in the background, think about turning it off, or music, turning it off. Or if you have an easily distractible child, like I did, is removing the toys or any games away from the computer area so that they're not tempted when they look at it during school. And lastly, this is a very difficult time for students, for parents, for teachers, for all of us. So when a student is having a difficult time, please be a compassionate listener and their educational partner. If you have questions at the end of this, I'll have some suggestions for who to contact. But remember, if you're not sure who to contact in the school, the very easiest way to start is the Bilingual Family Liaison. They will make sure you get to the right person. Something else that's very helpful that you can do all the time, not just during distance learning, whether it's a summer or breaks or just during the year, is to continue to use your home language. We know it's important that your child is learning English, but it's also very important that they maintain their home language and be very proud of their home language. Research tells us that students who are strong in their home language, especially around reading and writing, that transfers to them learning English. But even speaking and listening, it's important to maintain that home language if possible. So some suggestions for you is to read to them. If they're younger, you can read aloud a book in your home language. The Arlington Public Libraries have books in many languages. Or if your child is old enough, have them read a book on their own in your home language. One of my favorites that we did with our children, because we raised our children to speak English and Spanish at home, is to have debates about fun topics. When they were younger, we would debate things like what tastes better, cupcakes or cookies. And it's really fun to have that kind of debate, and especially because your child might not know the word for chocolate chips or frosting, in your home language. That's a great opportunity for you to share with them those terms. It could be something fun like that, or it could be a current event. We have an election coming up in the United States, or maybe you've been following elections in another country. A great conversation to have. It's a current event. And then lastly, I know this sounds old school, but writing letters to family members, or in this case, maybe the modern way, writing emails to family members in other countries, but using their home language. It gives students an opportunity to write in their home language. Writing a journal is another example of practicing the use of their home language. Let's make them proud of their home language and continue to develop it, while on the other hand, they're also learning English. So lastly, just some suggestions of questions you can ask. I know for our children, this is very successful. Sometimes I remember when my children were younger, I would say, "How was your day?" And they would say, "Good." That didn't give me a lot of information. So some of the suggested things that we did is we would, instead of say, "How was your day?" we would say, "What is something you learned today that made you smile?" Or "What is something you learned today that made you laugh?" Or "What is something you learned today that made you say, 'Wow, I didn't know that?'" And then have them explain to you why they laughed or smiled, or why they found that fact so interesting. Another example is, "What did you do today?" That might get you, "I don't know," or "nothing," or "I had math," or "I had science," or some quick answer. But if you ask it a different way, if you say to them, "Describe the two most interesting things you learned today," now you might get a longer description and a longer conversation. Or "What is something you did today that you have never done before?" Again, it might just bring out a longer conversation. Or instead of saying what today was fun, or was today fun, you can say, "Which of the last 3 days has been the most interesting?" So that they have to, in their mind, compare today with yesterday or the day before. And if you do it on a Monday, they'll have to think all the way back to Friday and Thursday. Again, just getting them to think through things and have to explain a little bit longer. It does a couple of things. It helps them practice their language, and it also gets them thinking a little more intensely, and of course, gives you more information about your child's day at school. So lastly, I'd like to share with you who to contact. Again, an easy start always is our bilingual family liaison in the school. They are a great connection to help connect you to the right people in the school. If your child, or if you have questions about your child's English language development, please contact the English learner teacher. They might have more than one, but you'll know the teacher it's the teacher who your child is working the most with. At elementary, if your child's in 2nd grade, feel free to contact his or her 2nd grade teacher as well. And at secondary, if it's health and PE or mathematics or science, feel free to reach out to that teacher. And again, secondary, if you have concerns about their social emotional well-being, please contact the L counselor. And even though we don't have L counselors at elementary, we do have counselors at elementary. So please reach out to the bilingual family liaison at elementary, who can connect you to the counselor if you have concerns about your child's well-being or the social emotional well-being. That is very important to us in Arlington Public Schools, that your child feels good and is feeling confident, and our counselors can really help with that. We also have social workers and psychologists, other staff in the building who can help you help your child. And lastly, you'll see the link there to the Engage page for Arlington Public Schools, a great way to stay connected to Arlington Public Schools. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of this Parent Academy for parents of English learners. I hope you found this very helpful, and I hope you're as excited about the school year as we are. As I speak, the L teachers are getting ready and getting excited about receiving your children into their virtual distance learning classroom, where it's going to be a fantastic year. So thanks again, and my name is Sam Klein. I'm the supervisor of the Office of English Learners, and I look forward to hearing about the successes of your children. Thanks, and have a terrific school year.